Amazing Grace by Right by Faith. Climbing up the leaf-covered hill a small distance away from the creek, Jeremy discovered the source of the cries. It was a Pokemon he'd never seen before, and it was being attacked by a Rattata. The Pokemon in question was white and green in color. It almost appeared to be wearing a dress of some sorts. If Jeremy hadn't known any better, he would have suspected it was a small child. Could it have possibly been a Pokemon from a nearby contest? That didn't make much sense. Why would a Pokemon from a contest be in the middle of the woods? Besides, Pokemon contests weren't as popular in Johto as they were in Hoenn. It was highly unlikely that one was being hosted near Twinsport or any of the surrounding towns. As explanations for the scene in front of him filtered through the boy's head, Jeremy continued to silently examine the mysterious creature. Its eyes seemed to be hidden from view behind a full head of thick, mint green hair. Two red horns, in line with each other, seemed to be protruding from the top of its head, separating its hair down the middle. While Jeremy had no idea what kind of Pokemon it was, what he did know was that it was in trouble. The Rattata's attack was so violent. Jeremy had watched Pokemon battles on TV, but never before had he seen one in person. It was different in the most horrible way imaginable. Cuts, bruises, and blood could be seen covering the pale white skin of the strange Pokemon as it cried out in pain. A faint whimper could be heard as it curled up on the ground after a particularly devastating tackle. Is this what he wanted to do when he grew up? To battle Pokemon and have them harm one another? No, he had to stop this! Jeremy felt a knot tighten in his chest as he watched the defenseless Pokemon take the brutal beating, unable to put up a fight of its own. What could he do? He was only a 6-year-old frail boy. He couldn't take on a Pokemon, even if it was only a Rattata. Their sharp teeth and powerful bite would cause a young kid like him serious injury if an attack connected. Even if he was older and stronger, the Rattata would still be dangerous. However, on the flip side, if he did nothing, whatever strange Pokemon the Rattata was attacking would surely die, or be left in a severely injured state. Seconds seemed like lifetimes, as Jeremy internally debated what to do. Should he risk his personal safety, or let a poor creature suffer, and more than likely die? The boy's eyes went wide as the Rattata leapt forward and sunk its teeth into the left arm of its victim, tearing the flesh with a wet, gut-wrenching noise. The ear-piercing scream of pain that came forth from the Pokemon flipped a switch inside of Jeremy. His options were weighed. He knew the odds. Attacking the Rattata would almost certainly ensure that he'd be injured, but doing nothing would result in the suffering and death of its defenseless target. He couldn't allow that to happen. Perhaps it was his naivete as a child that led him to believe that everything would work out okay, or a sense of blind bravery driven by honor. He didn't know. All the boy knew was that he couldn't allow the suffering of the Pokemon to continue. "Hey! Stop doing that!" Jeremy shouted as he ran over the hill, his small body puffed up in an effort to make himself more intimidating. The Rattata quickly jumped back and looked at the interloper. The rat Pokemon growled and began to aggressively circle Jeremy as though he were its prey. The boy gulped as the Rattata seemed to align itself for an attack. It was quite large, about a quarter of the boy's size. Even with his size advantage, Jeremy knew he wouldn't be able to match the Pokemon in terms of speed and power. He had to do something, and fast. Quickly looking around, Jeremy saw a large stick lying on the ground. It was fairly thick and quite long, the perfect self-defense weapon. Slowly sidestepping over to the stick, Jeremy quickly bent over and picked up the makeshift weapon. The Rattata seemed unfazed as it continued to eye over the intruder who had so stupidly interrupted its meal. Without warning, the rat Pokemon shot forward at an astounding speed. Jeremy almost didn't have time to react as the Rattata opened its jaw to bare its razor-sharp front teeth. Almost. The boy raised the stick he'd picked up to his chest and held it in front of him, praying it would defend him against the oncoming attack. The Rattata impacted it with enough force to push Jeremy clean off his feet and onto the ground behind him. The boy landed on his back as his attacker flew over him from the momentum of its attack. Before Jeremy could get back on his feet, however, he felt an unimaginable pain begin to radiate from his left arm. The boy screamed at the sensation and looked down to see its source. To his shock and horror, Jeremy saw the Rattata had turned around at an almost unnatural speed and clenched its powerful jaw onto his arm. Adrenaline pumped through the veins of the child, filling him with instinctual rage. Jeremy desperately reached for the stick he'd found earlier in an effort to use it as a weapon, but it was nowhere to be found. Excruciating seconds passed as the Rattata began to chew on Jeremy's arm in an attempt to further disable him. The boy could feel as the ligaments in his arm began to tear and snap as the razor-sharp teeth of the rat Pokemon cut through them. Jeremy had to find the stick, but it just wasn't there. Who knew where it had flown when he had been knocked onto his back? There was nothing around him. There were no rocks, sticks, or anything else that he could use to defend himself. He tried to use his fist to knock the rat off of him, but the small creature endured the blows, not yielding to the weak punches of the 6-year-old. A feeling of hopelessness descended upon Jeremy as he realized there was a possibility, no, almost certainty, that he was going to die in the forest at the jaws of a Rattata. He wouldn't be able to see his parents again. He wouldn't be able to help them raise his baby brother and sister. He wouldn't be able to do anything. So he started to cry. He cried from the pain of having his muscles ripped apart by the Rattata. He cried because he was afraid. But most of all, he cried because he wouldn't be able to see his family again. Powerful emotions of fear and grief ran through him as salty tears of agony flowed down his face. Then he felt it. The rough bark of the stick he'd found earlier caressed the palm of his right hand. With tears still in his eyes, the young boy gripped the stick with all his might and swung it across his body while screaming in anger-induced rage, landing a clean hit on the Rattata. The Pokemon released its grip on his arm and jumped back several feet upon realizing that the boy was now once again armed. Jeremy struggled to his feet. He felt weak as blood streaked down his left forearm, covering his hand in red. Just like that, the standoff began. Neither side moved as they analyzed each other. Jeremy knew the odds were still against him, but he had to remain strong. He had to continue to think about his family and everything he had to live for. He had to think about the strange Pokemon who would meet the same fate as him if he failed. He wouldn't let himself be done in by a Rattata, not while he still had fight left in him. Nearly a full minute passed before the Rattata made a move. It was not an attack directed at Jeremy, rather a swift retreat into the thick bush behind it. The battle was over. Jeremy had won.